Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Option webinar series. My name is Vivek Bhatnagar. I am a CTO and founder for UnifyCloud. So now just start jumping into the cloud governance models in Azure. The cloud creates a new paradigm for technologies that support the business. This new paradigm also change how we use, how do we adopt technology, and how we use technology, how we manage them and govern them. Uh, Cloud is nothing but when we virtually torn down our data center and rebuilt maybe with few lines of the code, and it is like now our complete data center is just a few lines of code, and that to run into an unattended processes. This actually forces us to rethink that how do I manage this new paradigm? How do I manage this my new cloud available like as a virtual data center? What are the traditional? Can I use a traditional approach, or do we need a especially a different way of thinking? In addition to this, the cloud governance is as listed down in these four steps is again iterative process, and as majority of process we have studied till now are iterative one. For organization with existing policy that govern on-premise IT environment, cloud governance should actually complement to those policies. But however, a lot of corporate policy integration between on-premise and cloud varies, like, and it varies also like how much, what is the cloud maturity of a company and what is the desired state they are looking for in the cloud. But over time, these processes of governance and these policies uh, merge to the same objective. So these are the few things. Look at so if you look at the four things we are going to understand today is basically governance methods and methodologies. How do we benchmark, which is typically a tool, and then building maybe a simple governance foundation, and how we can expand the same foundation to accommodate our complex workloads. So cloud adoption framework governance model. So this is the picture which actually brings the complete governance model into like one slide. Adopting cloud, as I always say, is a journey, not a destination. And along the way, there are clear milestone, tangible business benefits. But however, final state of cloud adoption is mostly unknown. And when company begin their journey of cloud adoption, uh, you need some sort of a guardrails to keep the company to a safe path on this journey. And cloud option framework provides this kind of a governance guides that basically guide your company into this cloud adoption journey. Similarly, taking the same analogy, uh, a journey without a target destination is just wandering. So it's important to establish a rough vision of end state before taking the first step. And following infographics, which is just I'm presenting in a slide, provide a frame of reference of the end state, that where you want to go. It is not your starting point, but always show you the potential destination. So these are the things. And cloud adoption framework also identify the key areas of importance in this cloud journey. And these are listed here, like cost management, security baseline, resource consistency, identity baseline, and definitely deployment and acceleration. Uh, within within the framework, these all five areas provide extra guide rails so that you can actually navigate your cloud path. If you look at the top of this governance framework, start with the corporate policy, and that's always true. Like you have to have a corporate overarching policy, and 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 it's the same way you define corporate policy. In each corporate policy, whether it's a cost management or whether any of the compliance management, you start with defining business risk, that if you, what are the risks your business is facing, and then you basically write down statements to mitigate those risks or put some boundaries around that risk. And also, it is also based on how much risk you can tolerate. And then you establish processes to measure that violation of those policies compliance you have put together and other things. So it's a standard way of building any policy and the corporate policy, and we will use the same process to build our different policies for these five areas. So as you can see that there is a cost management, security, resource, identity, and deployment. These all are the main 5 areas of cloud governance, and we need to have a policy on all these 5 areas for our as a governance policy. And for each of these 5 areas, the way we're going to build define business risk, define policy statement to mitigate those risks, and then establish process to measure it. Like, so we can say who is violating, who is not violating. So these are the just basic things about about these things. Here, as typically said that there are Azure services available which will help you in building cloud policy, their implementation, and building a process to these things. For example, like cost management, you have Azure Cloud Cost Management Service and Azure Advisor or Blueprints. These are the services which you can use for your defining statements, and you can also use them to as a control process. Similarly, in security, you have Azure Security Center. Resource consistency is mainly Resource Manager and its template. Identity is Azure AD, and finally deployment accelerators are Azure DevOps, GitHubs, and other integrations. So this is a complete picture, and you also have a lot of third-party tools available to support the same 5 same 5 areas, and a lot more time companies which are migrating to Azure already using some of these third-party tools on their on-premise infrastructure, and they feel more comfortable to bring them on Azure. So that's why these all tools are today available on Azure. They're certified. You can find them as an appliances and all other things. However, as an architect, I will put a word of caution here that integrating any of these things is third-party tools are far more difficult in Azure than using Azure first-party services. To give you an idea about the offers, like for example, if I can implement Azure firewall in a native way, maybe at best in a week time for a fairly large customer with 5,000 assets. But if I need to do maybe the customer asks, okay, do a Cisco firewall or do a F5 firewall in the same fashion and all, it is, first of all, it's going to be very expensive for that customer. Secondly, I'm going to spend at least 7 to 8 weeks to do the same work. So be careful, like before you commit to bring your third party. You're always welcome to bring third party if you don't have an option and customer looking for some feature and other thing, and they can justify using any third party. If customer has not a justification, just their preference, then you should push back a customer and say that let's use the Azure first party service. It is not only cheaper, it's easy to manage. It's basically easy to upgrade. So that's what our recommendation whenever you look at it. Okay, let's talk about how do we assess, when you when anybody start building their journey for cloud governance. The main thing is like, how do you measure where do we stand? Like in case, unless until you are just completely a new company and other thing. For that matter, Microsoft has released a very good tool which basically you can use to understand that where do you stand in your cloud journey, what you need to do, and you can do it like very easily. And a lot more time I don't do it with my customers. I actually do it. I talk to them and then I run it for them, because a lot more time customers are not very comfortable in answering these things. You can select your role like business decision maker or primary IT decision makers. That role, you can put your company name. For example, I just put a CTO, and I just put like my industry. Maybe it's going to be IT and software. And you can see that it will give you some areas, so you can select all of them, because these are the 5 discipline plus organization readiness part. So let's get started, and it will ask you question from each areas. And it's basically, so if you can see that these are the questions that typically they ask to establish your operational readiness, to establish your cost readiness, resource consistency, resource baseline, identity, and all. And this is a series of questions which you can answer. And then based on these series of questions, they will present you some sort of a report card and tell you your your maturity in those areas and additional things you can do to better cost manage or better security manage, identity manage. It's very useful tool. And you can actually log in and save this and send it to your team and ask them to look at these parts. But it's a very, very useful tool, and I highly recommend to use this tool in your when you start the journey of your governance. So let's talk about like how do you build a basic governance MVP. MVP stands for minimum viable products. Just a way of defining something basic things. Um, there are again the same guidelines. Like whenever you start building a governance for your company or for your organization, never take an approach of boiling the whole ocean. You start small. Start small. Just focus on those workloads you're moving and just do it. And a lot more time it will feel that you are just organizing things, not just governing this, and which is fine. Maybe for the first of your first version of your governance is just organization. And as you bring more and more workloads in the cloud, you can actually evaluate your risk and then enhance this your governance, and then add few more things as you basically go to build more and more these things. Also, it is again, like everything is dependent on business risk and other thing. But there are two types of governance policies and another thing which we have given, or which Microsoft has given a lot of guidance around it. One is definitely standard governance guide, which is for simpler organization. Like if you are doing a simpler organization thing, if you are basically doing something which is smaller, this thing. So how do you decide whether you are doing a simple or a complex enterprise? So in case you are dealing with less than less than 5,000 or less than 10,000 of assets, this would be simple only, single geography, less than 5 data centers, or single forest identity and other things. So this will mean that you are dealing with a simpler organization, and you can actually look at Azure template for a standard governance guide. There's also blueprint for a standard governance guide. Then in case you are dealing with a complex, large enterprises, which is like having more than 10,000 assets, multi-cloud, and also has a lot of complex identity layers, multi-forest, multi-layer of governance, and need to compliance with the third party, then you'll end up into your complex cloud consideration. So this is a typically approach that people take in deciding that what is a complex and other organization way. And once you taken the guide that decide is simpler or complex, the process flow the same way. I don't think there's a main difference in process. Like there's some additional process you have to do. For example, more compliances, more things, because it's a multiple cloud. You have to maybe complex disaster recovery, other thing to build those kinds of things.